Ever feel like you just can't focus, like your brain's constantly switching between a million different tabs?
Yeah, it's like we're all juggling chainsaws, and those chainsaws are our phones and computers and all the demands on our attention.
So in this deep dive, we're going to tackle this problem head on.
Right, using Chris Hayes' book, Twilight of the Elites.
We're going to pull out those insightful nuggets about how we lost our attention span in the digital age.
Because, there is something kind of unsettling about feeling like you're not in control of your own mind.
Definitely. So let's jump into Hayes' argument, a fascinating one. He basically says our attention has become a new form of labor.
Yeah, just like the Industrial Revolution, right? Back then, human labor became something that could be bought and sold.
Right. And now?
Now, in the digital age, it's our attention that's been commodified. It's a resource to be mined and exploited for profit.
So instead of clocking into a factory, we're constantly clocking into our devices.
You got it. And Hayes takes it a step further, actually. He connects this to Marx's theories of alienation.
Marx, like the communist philosopher.
The one and only. Remember that feeling of being outside yourself at work, like you're just a cog in the machine?
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah, that's what Marx was talking about, that disconnect from what you're producing. And Hayes argues it's similar to how we feel endlessly scrolling on our phones. Our attention is pulled in so many directions, it's like we're not even in control of it anymore.
Wow. That's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, it is. Like, who's really running the show here? Us or the algorithms?
It's like our minds are being strip mined for those precious seconds of engagement.
Exactly. And all this distraction, it comes at a cost,
Yeah.
We're losing our ability for deep thought, to be present.
To really connect with the world around us, right?
Exactly. It's like Hayes talks about with the Kufan people of the Amazon. They have this incredible ability to focus for hours on end.
Really?
Tracking animals, crafting tools, fully immersed in the task at hand. Their attention is deep and sustained. We, on the other hand,
struggle to sit alone with our thoughts for 5 minutes.
Right. Some studies even suggest people would rather give themselves electric shocks than endure a few minutes of boredom.
That's wild. So is it any wonder we reach for our phones the moment we feel even a twinge of boredom?
We're so used to being constantly stimulated, it's like we've forgotten how to just be.
And that's the irony, isn't it? The more we seek distraction, the more elusive true absorption becomes.
It's a vicious cycle.
And Hayes argues it's not just impacting us individually, it's reshaping our society. He points to the rise of figures like Donald Trump as a symptom of this attention-obsessed age.
Yeah, Trump was a master of what Hayes calls the megaphone guy strategy.
Megaphone guy.
He knew that in a world drowning in information, the loudest voice usually wins. So he weaponized outrage and controversy to dominate the attention landscape.
You gotta admit, it worked. Love him or hate him, Trump knew how to grab and hold our attention.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, you see this tactic everywhere now, not just in politics.
It's like a survival tactic in the digital age, right? You have to be loud and outrageous to even get noticed.
And the sad part is, substance and nuance get lost in all the noise. It's a race to the bottom.
So we're stuck in this crazy cycle where we crave distraction, reward the people who exploit our attention, and lose the ability to even deal with complexity.
It's a bleak picture for sure. But Hayes does offer some hope. He talks about creating these things he calls attentional farmers markets.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Farmers markets for our attention. What does that even mean?
It's like, how do we reclaim our focus? How do we reconnect with the analog world?
So things like physical books, newspapers, even those dumb phones that just make calls and send texts.
All of that. Spaces and experiences that offer an alternative to the constant commodification of our attention.
So it's about making a conscious choice about what we want to pay attention to, rather than letting algorithms decide for us.
Exactly. Like, remember vinyl records? They were supposed to be dead and gone.
And now they're making a comeback.
Huge comeback. And Hayes thinks the same thing could happen with these non-digital experiences. People are craving authenticity, depth, a break from the constant digital bombardment.
It's like pushing back against the tide, reclaiming our minds from the clutches of the attention economy. But is it really possible to escape the pull of the digital world?
Hayes believes it is. And he points to platforms like Signal, that messaging app.
Signal? What's so special about Signal?
It's a nonprofit, so they're not focused on just making money. They actually prioritize user privacy.
Interesting. So they're not trying to exploit our attention for profit.
No, they're trying to build a space for genuine connection. And it's working too. More and more people are using Signal.
So there's hope for a digital world that prioritizes human connection over profit.
Absolutely. It's not all doom and gloom, but we have to be intentional about it.
We have to choose to create that world.
Right. And on an individual level, Hayes asks this really thought-provoking question.
What's that?
If you had the superpower of hyperfocus, what would you choose to pay attention to?
Whoa, that is a good question. What would I choose?
It's a challenge, right, to decide what truly matters to us in a world that's designed to distract us.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we do have a choice. We don't have to be slaves to the algorithm. We can reclaim our minds. We can redirect our attention toward the things that actually bring us joy and meaning and connection.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's kind of crazy how all this connects to our need for social attention.
Social attention? You mean like wanting to be popular?
Not exactly. It's more fundamental than that. Humans, we're wired to seek recognition from others. It's crucial for our well-being.
Like we all want to feel seen and heard, right?
Exactly. Think about it. You hear your name mentioned across a crowded room. What happened?
My ears perk up.
Right. You instantly want to know what's being said. We can't help but be drawn to attention, even if it's just a whisper.
It's like a built-in radar for anything related to us.
And social media, they've figured out how to weaponize this.
Oh, yeah. Those platforms are designed to tap right into that desire for attention.
Every post, every share, it's all fuel for that need for validation.
And it's so addictive, too. That little dopamine hit when you see a notification pop up.
Like a social slot machine.
Yeah.
It's constantly rewarding us, keeping us hooked.
But just like with gambling, there's a downside.
Big time.
Yeah.
Hayes argues that this constant chasing after social attention, it actually makes it harder to connect with people in a real, meaningful way.
Because we're so focused on how we're presenting ourselves online, we forget how to just be ourselves.
Exactly. We spend so much time curating our online personas, trying to project a certain image. It's exhausting. And we lose sight of the things that really matter for connection, like vulnerability and authenticity.
It's no wonder that rates of anxiety and depression are going up. Loneliness too, right?
Absolutely. We're constantly comparing ourselves to these idealized versions of other people.
Which are totally fake.
Most of the time, yeah. It's a social comparison trap on steroids. We see everyone's highlight reel, and it's easy to feel like we're not good enough.
So how do we break free from this cycle? How do we reclaim our attention and get back to, actually feeling good?
It's tough, but not impossible. Hayes suggests a few strategies. The first is to just be more mindful of our attention. Where are we directing our focus? Who are we letting control it?
So, are we scrolling mindlessly, or are we choosing to engage with something meaningful?
Right. It's about taking inventory, recognizing the patterns, and making conscious choices about how we spend our most precious resource, our attention.
It's like creating a budget, but for our attention.
That's a great way to put it. Once we're more aware, then we can start making changes, set boundaries with technology, carve out time for activities that nourish our minds and souls.
And prioritize real face-to-face connection.
Exactly. Prioritize depth over shallowness, meaning over fleeting distractions.
This is starting to sound like a lot of work.
It is. Reclaiming our attention is a battle, but it's a battle worth fighting.
Why? What's at stake here?
Our well-being, for starters. But it goes beyond that. This attention crisis, it's impacting our society as a whole. It's making it harder to solve complex problems, harder to have civil discourse, harder to even just connect with each other.
So it's not just about feeling less stressed or whatever. It's about, the future of our society.
Exactly. And Hayes sees this twilight of the elites as a chance to rebuild, to create a world where human flourishing comes before profit.
So what would that world look like?
A world where our attention is treated as a precious resource to be nurtured and protected, not a commodity to be exploited.
That's a powerful vision. And honestly, it sounds pretty amazing. But how do we even begin to create that kind of world?
Well, to understand that, we got to break down the different types of attention we experience.
Different types? I thought attention was just attention.
It's more nuanced than that. Hayes outlines three main aspects. First, there's voluntary attention.
Okay, like when I force myself to focus on a boring task.
Not quite. Think of it as the kind of attention we consciously choose to direct, like when we're engrossed in a book or listening intently to a podcast.
That laser focus when you're totally absorbed in something.
You got it. Then there's involuntary attention. This is the type that's always on, constantly scanning our surroundings for anything new or potentially dangerous.
So The reason we jump when we hear a loud noise.
Exactly. It's there to keep us safe, but it can also be a major source of distraction.
So our attention is kind of like a security guard, always on the lookout for trouble.
Great analogy. And then, of course, there's social attention, the attention we pay to and receive from others.
The currency of human connection.
Exactly. It's what makes us feel seen, heard, and valued. And guess what? This is the type of attention that those digital attention merchants have figured out how to exploit.
They know how to push our buttons, make us crave those likes and shares and notifications.
They've hacked our social wiring, turning our natural desire for connection into a profit-generating machine.
And the more scattered our social attention becomes, the less we can truly connect with anyone.
It's a recipe for isolation and anxiety. So the question is, how do we escape this digital siren song? Well, Hayes, he suggests a few strategies. One is kind of interesting. He calls it the principle of limitation.
The principle of limitation, what's that all about?
Basically, by, consciously limiting our exposure to distractions, we can actually become more resourceful, creative, and present.
So less is more.
Exactly. By simplifying our lives, reducing the constant influx of information and stimulation, we create space for deeper thinking, more meaningful connections, and ultimately greater peace of mind.
It's like a digital decluttering, a chance to reset our relationship with technology, make it more intentional, more fulfilling.
You got it. And it's not just about individual choices either. Hayes also talks about the importance of creating spaces online that aren't just about making money.
Like digital sanctuaries, free from the constant pressure to buy and sell.
Exactly. Places where our attention isn't constantly being mined and monetized.
But do those spaces even exist?
They do. Platforms like Signal show it's possible to build online spaces that actually prioritize privacy, connection, and human well-being over commercial exploitation.
Okay, so that's encouraging. It means we don't have to be slaves to the attention economy. There are alternatives out there.
Absolutely. But it's up to us to support them, to demand better from the tech companies, and to work towards creating a world where our attention is treated as something valuable, something to be protected, not just something to be exploited.
Because it is valuable, right? Our attention.
More valuable than we realize. It's the foundation of our experience, our relationships, our very humanity. It's time to reclaim it.
It's a big challenge, but one definitely worth taking on. And for anyone who wants to explore this topic further, I highly recommend checking out Chris Hayes' Twilight of the Elites. It's a must-read for anyone trying to make sense of our attention-obsessed world. You can find a link to purchase the book in the show notes.
It's definitely a book that'll make you think.
And speaking of thinking, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this deep dive with anyone who might find it valuable. Until next time, stay curious and keep those minds sharp.